So please state your name and favorite Power Query function or feature.
My name's Ken Puls, and my favorite Power Query function or feature has to be the refresh button.
Welcome to Power Query Magic. So, Ken, we've known each other a few years now.
We have?
We have met a few times. We have had a few beers together.
We have indeed.
I've got a tricky question for you. Do you remember where we first met? And this is harsh because I only just remembered when I was writing up this question.
Yeah, I'm going to say that it was at the, I'm trying to remember the brand of hotel, but I'm thinking it was the Crown something in Melbourne, I think.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Were you a newly minted MVP at that time?
I was indeed.
Yeah.
Damn, you've got a better memory than me. This all came flooding back to me when I was sort of scratching my head about this.
Well, of course, I don't remember what the hotel was actually called because that's not my brand of hotel. But
But back in the pre-COVID days, you'd have been to a fair few hotels in your time, traveling around.
I think the last count I had, the last year before we stopped traveling, I think I was away from home for 150 nights. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite a bit, and then COVID hit, and at that point it was I've been home for over 365 days.
Yeah, it's a change. It's a change.
Very much.
And home is Vancouver Island.
Vancouver Island, yeah, a little town called Nanaimo, so about 100,000 people here.
So this last week I've been watching season 1 of Alone. Are you familiar with the TV show?
Familiar with the TV show, haven't watched it myself.
So they're basically just people stranded on Vancouver Island and left to survive.
Yes.
So my impression was it's a beautiful place, man, but there's some harsh stuff there.
It's a beautiful place, but yeah, there's some harsh environments if you if you get out of the city. I mean, we like to say out here that anything outside of the city is bear country.
Yeah.
So
you've got bears, wolves, cougars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think Australia's bad with our, couple of snakes and a few spiders.
Listen, in Canada, nobody gives you a book that says, here's the top 10 of any specific category of animal that can kill you, right? Where you Aussies like to do that kind of stuff. For us, I mean, it's like,
true.
You want our apex predators, we'll give you 10, but that's it. You don't get to pick the top 10 bears or the top 10, whatever. So.
And have you always been there in Vancouver Island?
I used to live on the mainland, actually, in one of the suburbs of Vancouver, but I've been over here, for the past, 20 years.
Okay.
So.
Wow. And so here's a tough question. How would your friends and family describe what you do?
So I actually asked my daughter this, and she says, I just tell people that you do complicated stuff with computers. And I kind of laughed at that, and she says, because honestly, Dad, she says, if I told anybody that you work with Excel and Power BI, they wouldn't even know what those were. I'm like, oh, there you go. So, fair enough.
It's a tough question. I'm in the same boat, and just as people don't really, it's that sort of Chandler effect from Friends that no one really knows. But how do you explain what you do? How would you explain what you do to people?
I was just actually really happy that she said complicated because that makes me feel good, right? I mean, when somebody asks me what I do, I tell people that I teach people how to use Excel and Power BI properly to build advanced and refreshable solutions, as well as develop software to help people make people's lives easier and build using best practices. I wear lots of hats, but that's sort of the elevator pitch line, I guess. But yeah, it is a tough one, isn't it? I mean, it's
and it depends who you're talking to as well. I find
absolutely.
It's not the sort of thing you can just drop in over the barbecue and just go, oh yeah, I'm just doing this sort of thing, and
you can, but you tend to find yourself alone if you do. So.
Yeah, there's a bit of a nod, and then conversation,
and then they disappear.
I feel that. So I heard you the other day talk about your first computer being a Commodore 64. Okay.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So any favorite games from back in the day on the Commodore 64?
Geez, I'm
Yet?
trying to think
Or was it just pure programming?
No, see, the Commodore 64 was my parents' computer that they bought. My mom bought it so that she could write and publish my dad's book. And then the first computer I bought with my own money was a Commodore 128, and that one I actually got a magazine where I actually got a game and programmed the game and whatnot. But I honestly don't really remember doing a lot of gaming on that PC. That didn't seem to really start until we actually got an IBM compatible clones in and whatnot. So. The first game that I remember being absolutely infatuated with was Ultima 5. Is a fantastic role-playing game and whatnot, and it sort of set the genre for me that I love those kind of games, still do. Actually.
Yeah.
So,
because I was a ZX Spectrum child. That's where I started. So 48K and some decent games in there, and again. A little bit of programming, not too much.
Yeah.
But, we all sort of started somewhere with these little things. People had a bit of just the interest to do it. I guess it says something about people who like this sort of computery stuff.
It's funny, man. I remember, playing with computers. I remember when we got CGA graphics and then EGA graphics. It's like, man, we got 8 colors we can use. It was amazing, right? Compared to today. And so I tell my kid I'm so old I predate color.
That's it. It's it's an interesting sort of place to start with this sort of thing, and in terms of then your first job that would have been involved with using computers, programming stuff. Where did that all sort of start then?
I took in high school we had a work internship program where I actually went to work for a bank for a while, and they had me building spreadsheets in Lotus 1-2-3. I can't say they were complicated. I would consider it more today more like data entry, but it was high level spreadsheet stuff in black and orange. Those are the colors. But my sort of where I really started to get used to, or you started really working with things was when I actually got into a controllership position. That's when the spreadsheet became sort of a really integral part of everything you did, and it wasn't something that you went to work with spreadsheets. It was just they were that thing that showed up, and that's what you put everything into because it was there, right? So how that evolved turned out to be an interesting life, isn't it? But
and was there anybody sort of how did you learn? No courses, or what was the?
No, self-taught. I've always been, computers have been around, right? I guess I'd say we're the first generation where computers actually sort of were hitting in our teens and became sort of synonymous with what we did, and were just part of the place we were at. When I started in working as a controller at actually an orchid greenhouse, I took the job as the accountant and system administrator, not really knowing anything about systems, but the only job requirement that they sort of gave me at the time was, do you like computers and will you actually work with our IT person that we bring in on occasion? I'm like, I love computers, sure, why not? And yes, I'll work with the IT person. Beyond that, as I say, it's always been a learn on the job sort of thing. I never had a teacher for this stuff. You picked up from the different consultants and people that you talk to. And spreadsheet-wise, the Excel was one of those things that you pick up and you think you're really good until you meet somebody that knows more than you are, and you pick up a couple of tricks from them, and that sort of cycle continues. But the big part was when we finally had someone who programmed a macro and sent it to us, and I ended up having to learn and maintain that. And that was the real sort of part where I actually really fell in love with Excel, because that was the part where you finally figured out how to make the program work for you rather than the other way around, and it changed everything, just everything.
But I think that inheriting other people's files and work and having to learn how they work is a just indispensable way of learning. Having a need. Just trying to learn stuff for the sake of learning stuff, I'm not so good with that. I don't know what you're like in terms of reading books and stuff just for the technical part of it. It's more...
And same. For me, it's all about having that practical use case scenario. And, in the case of where you're given something that is way over your head, and it's like, okay, this is yours now. And then it breaks 3 days later, and you go, can I call you? nope, my number is going to be disconnected. I don't want to hear about it ever again. So you got to figure it out. Well, there's no better motivator than that, right? And then when you start to actually hit those little successes where you actually figure things out, I mean, for me, that's enough. It's like, oh wow, this is amazing. Let's just keep going. Let's see what we can do with this and whatnot. So,
do you think there's this sort of drive to do something in a better way? Do you sit there and you think there's got to be a better way to do this, and you then actually go and do something about it?
I think it depends, right? It depends on the person and it depends on the scenario. It depends on how much time you have and how much time it's costing you and different things like that too.
Yeah.
It's our favorite answer for everything. It depends. But for me, the real catalyst that sort of drew me into this was when we had our staff cut that came in 33% overnight, and we're going to tighten your deadlines, give you more work to do and whatnot. And the only way through that was to start, really investing in automation. And when I say investing in automation, I mean, I'd been playing around with VBA at the time and thought, hey, this language looks like it might be useful. I better go and throw myself at it. And my boss, Jim, he was like, look, go for it. Give it a shot, because we don't know what else we can do here. And so, I mean, that was, necessity being the mother of invention. I mean, you sit there, you record, and you're trying to hack things away. You're posting in forums, trying to get an answer. And, the challenge with that one is it was a real big onboard to try and learn VBA in short course. And I mean, I would say within a month I got, halfway competent, and within 2 months I was competent. And, within 5 years I was, I don't want to say expert, but certainly I have pretty good command and pretty happy with the way that it's working. But I mean, I was almost programming full time from no experience at the time. I mean, it was a rough onboard, but boy oh boy, I mean, after you get into that, I mean, I managed to save myself enough time. Like, you dedicate enough time, but then save yourself enough time in it that I was able to go back after that and say, yeah, now I do want to push it forward. How can I make it better? I hacked it, but can I make this more maintainable and whatnot? And I've always been driven that way to try and push things to make them bigger and better. It's a funny thing, Win, I don't know about you, but I find that the times that I do my best developing is when I have too much stuff on my plate.
Okay.
I don't know why. And I always joke with somebody when they give me something, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to build that feature now. I should totally be working on something else, but this is just getting me right now, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
So.
Yeah, and you just sometimes, and there is that trade-off between, I think you touched on it, around the time it takes you to do something manually because you just can get it done, and the time it takes to explore, to learn a better way of doing something because it's going to save you time next time, and the time after. And the time after that?
You're a programmer when you spend 40 hours programming something to save yourself 5 minutes.
Yeah,
right? But it's all about when that 5 minutes happens. It's important in the equation. So
totally. And if you look back at some of your early day macros, would you laugh at yourself, do you think?
Oh, I definitely
have. Would you curse yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely.
Who was that guy?
No, I wouldn't curse myself, but I definitely. I mean, I love it. I look at it this way. I mean, if you look back at code that you wrote 2 years ago, and you look at it and you don't see something that you could do better, that means you stopped learning.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can always be learning more on this stuff. And, I mean, I look back at code that I wrote, and I still have some samples from when I first started. And, I mean, you look back at it, and it's laughable. It's like, wow, okay, yeah, you recorded this, and you tweaked this tiny little bit here, and I'm just surprised that didn't blow up, right? But then at the same time, I mean, there's now times when I'll go and I'll crack back into some code, and you look at it, and you go, how the hell did I ever come up with that solution? That's brilliant. And that's the kind of stuff that makes you happy, right? When you look back and you go, you were in the zone and you've forgotten how you did it, but you go, wow, that's cool, right? Or it's still working after 5 years without being touched. I mean, that's when you feel successful. And it's, I don't know, it's a nice feeling on some of those things.
Yeah. But at that point you go, damn, I wish I'd documented this better.
Well, that's why I always tell people, learn to read the code, right? So, because I will say that when I first started writing, I had so many code comments in my stuff, and then you go back and you look at it later and go, well, those aren't accurate anymore. I guess you changed the code and didn't update the comments, right? And that's a danger thing. I still like to comment my code a lot, but yeah, being able to read it and figure out if it's actually the same story is an important part.
Yeah. So where did Power Query come into this then? Where was your first hit of Power Query, and how did you come across it?
Well, Power Query showed up on my radar when in an MVP summit. So we were sitting at Microsoft, and they brought this thing out and tried it out and said, "Look, we want to play around with this thing." It was still under a code name at that point. Back in the day, I think it was called Data Explorer. So I got my hands on a sample of that, and it's actually kind of a funny story. I got my hands on a sample of it, and I played around with it, and I thought, this is interesting and whatnot. But I ended up actually having a meeting with Miguel Yopis, who is the guy with Power Query that runs all the stuff, who you obviously know as well. And I sat in a meeting with him, and I literally told him that I thought that he was building a terrible replacement for SQL Server Management Studio.
Okay.
Those were my words. And
Wow.
and he kind of looked at me a little bit confused, and he said, "Ken, we're trying to build a software so that business intelligence analysts don't have to use SQL Server Management Studio. They can just do the transformations without getting into that software." And I say at that point I went, "Oh, well, that changes everything. Okay, now I get it." I actually had thought it was targeted at a totally different audience. And it's interesting because I don't know why I hit that hurdle, but I mean, I'd been spending a lot of time in SSMS at that point in time, trying to do some database stuff and whatnot. And there were some things that for me were still easier in SSMS than they were in Power Query. I installed SSMS today to go and do some management stuff, and I'm like, damn, I wish this was as easy as Power Query. So it's it's funny. I mean, it's come full circle, right?
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But yeah, I'd say, I mean, once I got my hands on it though, and we started to do something, I mean, the big value prop for me was where we actually found a query that there was a transformation that we were trying to do through SQL Server Management Studio, and we had been fighting it for about a year, and we never got close because it involved bringing some data in, pivoting it, making some changes, unpivoting it, making some changes, and then repivoting again into a different way. It was a really ugly data sample. And we could never get it done through SQL Server. My SQL skills are just not good enough for that. Once I got Power Query in front of me and played around with it, I think I poked it around for about 35 minutes and had it working. And of course, it wasn't even what I was supposed to be working on that day. And I mean, I remember cutting the code and emailing it to Mitchell, who was on my team, and saying, "Dude, you got to paste this into the query editor and hit run and let me know what happened." And I heard from down the hallway the "Holy crap!" And I went, "Okay, this is amazing, right?" And from that point, it sort of was just, what can't this thing do? So I mean, we really dove into it in a big way, and it's just been an indispensable tool for what we needed to do.
Yeah. Can you sort of? I can't picture life without it. Looking back now, what on earth did we do beforehand? A lot more VBA.
I can picture life without it when I bear many scars. So yeah, it's a hard memory to forget. But I can't imagine trying to do the stuff that we do today anymore without using it. I mean, it's there's so many things that I know a lot of people would just reach out to regular old Excel and go and do this manually, and I'm like, no, you know what? I can actually do this faster through Power Query, even if the load time is a little bit slower sometimes. Just the robustness and richness of the transformation stack that we have inside is really, really useful to do all kinds of incredible things. So,
and sort of where, in terms of its use out in the wild, have you got any sort of scenarios where it's had a significant impact somewhere, or is there one case, or is it just a broad range of impactful little incremental bits everywhere?
Yes and yes and yes. I mean, like, it's got all kinds of things, right? I mean, we run into, I remember being at a conference in Australia where we had one lady that came up to us and said that she was looking for some help with some stuff, and I was actually coming back to the table. I didn't even get there, and it took, I think, about 30 seconds for one of my colleagues to solve her problem, and that was because he was explaining what he did as he went along. And when he went and hit the load button and it loaded the information, she looked at it and she said, "Oh." And we said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she says, she says, "That's exactly what I needed." I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "So," she says, "That was it? Like, it took 30 seconds? And we're like, "Yeah, how are you feeling right now?" She said, "I'm really trying to figure out if I'm happy or angry, because I've been giving up 6 hours of my family time every Sunday to do that job," right? I mean, so there's someone who's got a quality of life enhancement. I mean, and 6 hours a week is a fair amount, right? I had a client in London, England, who They managed to do some work with Power Query and managed to save one of their analysts a full day per week on something, 52 days a year.
Yeah.
Her boss was just absolutely thrilled because now it meant that he could actually use her for what he hired her for instead of pushing data around and doing work. I actually had I got an email out of the blue one day from somebody who had read M is for Data Monkey and said, look, I just want to let you know that, I work in a specific industry in Eastern Canada. It's the liquor industry. And there were some regulations that came in from one of the government departments about what they had to do to report back to the province. And they figured that it would take them a full-time person that they would have to hire in order to be able to do this reporting. Not a small thing to go and put on a small business. And the fellow said, look, I jumped on Power Query. I started working around with this thing, and I've actually got it to the point now where it takes, I got to hit the refresh button, and it takes about 5 minutes to do its reload. So they managed to save themselves a full-time position, basically, that they didn't have to hire in order to do that. I mean, you look at that and go, wow. I mean, now you got competitive advantage versus the other players in your industry. I mean, it's, it runs the gamuts from 5 minute savings here a couple times a week to, to a position a month. I mean, like it's crazy how flexible it is. But I would say on average, when we talk to people and ask them what their time savings is, from people that have really embraced Power Query, 4 to 6 hours a week of time savings is the norm, and that's amazing, right? I mean, just incredible.
I'd agree with that from our experience as well. Yeah, it is. So why do only, I don't know, give me a percentage of people that know about it? What's awareness? Percentage of let's say Excel users that would really benefit from it, okay? Because Excel users are a broad range. We've got people who keep shopping lists who will have no need for Power Query versus people building crazy big financial models for institutes. So let's say people who would benefit from Power Query, what percentage of users know about it, that it exists at all?
I'd say probably 10% of people who could leverage it would know about it, and of those, probably 10% are actually trying, and of those, 10% have been successful. I mean, having said that, I don't want to denigrate the success to onboard ratio, because I think that once you actually get inside, the biggest thing is, as long as you're not afraid of clicking a button, as long as you know that you can actually roll back your step by clicking an X somewhere, what I always encourage people to do is, if you see a button in Power Query, you click it to find out what it does, because you can't break anything, right? You can always undo it. But the challenge is you've got to get past that sort of first hurdle of, well, I get into this new window, and how do the pieces work together? I mean, honestly, you need if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you need a 15-minute lesson, right? If you want to get really good with it, well, you could spend a lot more time learning, right? But the nice part about it is that it is a program that I think is conducive to those people who are self-starters and do want to just experiment, to really get sort of going and playing around with things quickly along the way. Having said that, if you want to get really good with it, I mean, we always advocate that you take a course, right? I mean, that's just the way it goes, because we can show you all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah, and is that sort of, in terms of lessons or advice for newcomers who do want to find out more about it? There's so much good content out there, just, that people blog, YouTube videos, etc. There's training courses, but have you got any sort of specific advice about what people should start with, or is it just start clicking and?
Again, it depends on the person, right? I mean, we have a site at skillwave.training which has the Power Query Academy. I mean, it's the most complete and comprehensive Power Query course, I believe, in the world, and that's our intention, is to keep it that way. So whether you've never worked with it or whether you have worked with Power Query a lot, we believe that you will learn a ton in what we have there. So if you're interested in taking a big course on it, then that would be the place to go. And we work really hard to keep that up to date and keep on new stuff going into it. I'm also aware that that's not for everybody, right? I mean, for me, I'm a person that likes to just jump in with no documentation and see what happens when you click a button. I mean, I've only accidentally formatted a server once in the middle of the workday, but I'm actually not even joking. But the nice thing with Power Query is that you don't have to run that risk of taking the organization down, like I did. It allows you to sort of play around with those, but there's two ways in my opinion of learning. I mean, number one is that you can go in there and you can do it yourself the hard way. I mean, that's learning the hard knocks route. That's my preferred one because the lessons for me stick better. But having said that, I mean, we develop training so that people don't have to go through and get beaten up throughout their entire life, and they can actually get onboarded quickly, and we can share our pain to help people get moving faster. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of great blogs out there, lots of great YouTube videos. I mean, the benefits of those, or you can grab bite-sized pieces of stuff that maybe don't go together just to get inspired by things. The benefits of a course is that you get a curriculum that you can work through that actually sort of layers it on a little bit at a time, so that you don't get hit with something that's way up here when you're still getting started, right? So
yeah.
All depends on learning styles.
So let's talk about the book. Where did the M is for Data Monkey book come from? So you're sitting there, you're playing about with this stuff, you think it's awesome. Write a book. What's the story?
So that is that's a funny story too. I'm playing around with Power Query. I'm having a good time with it and whatever else. And then I get this email out of the blue from Miguel Escobar saying, "Hey, dude, want to write a book?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure. What the heck? Let's do it." And actually, I think that was my first introduction to Miguel. Was an email from him saying, "I want to write a book," and Bill Jelen said, "You should write with Ken. You guys should go talk to each other." So that's sort of how we met, right? So, and which is funny because I mean it's turned into a real good working relationship with. We've been working together on a lot of stuff for a long time. So we got into it and we started writing or we started to sort of flesh out our outline, and I think we came up with the title first. I mean, that's where the M is for Data Monkey. Data Monkey was a derogatory term for somebody that works with data all the time. I've always liked to sort of grab some of those things and try and embrace it. I mean, I remember when I wore the title of geek even when it wasn't cool, right? So I'm like, we can do the same with Data Monkey, darn it. We just, I don't know, we crafted the title and we really enjoyed it. I mean, this was going to be a book about using this stuff, and when we started scoping it, that's when we realized that it didn't actually make sense to write a book on M. What it made sense to do was write a book on how to use Power Query. And but so
just for people listening, then, what's your distinction between the two?
M versus Power Query.
Yeah.
So M is the programming language that Power Query uses to do everything. When you click buttons in Power Query, it writes M code, the most Googleable letter ever. It writes M code behind the scenes in order to actually do what you're doing. So basically, you're clicking buttons, you're essentially writing macros behind the scenes in this language called M. But the beautiful thing about Power Query is that the engineers have done such a phenomenal job on it that, to be honest with you, 99.9% of people that use Power Query will never, probably should never, actually look at the underlying M code. You don't need to because they've done so much other stuff.
Yeah.
So when we first started this, we were kind of going like M, well, that's the programming language. It's for Data Monkey. That's kind of fun and whatever else. And we liked the title so much that when we started actually changing the focus into be a book on how to use Power Query, we just couldn't get rid of the title. We kept it. So having said that, it's a terrible title for searting. Right?
Okay.
Like, why would you buy that book? So the next edition when it comes out will be called Master Your Data for Excel and Power BI. But we'll still have M is for Data Monkey down in the subtext down the bottom, formerly known as, right? So because we are proud of it, we do love the monkey. So
absolutely. And do you think there's the question's been asked recently around why Power Query isn't as well known as DAX? So I guess that there's a I don't know. What's your view on that? I've got some thoughts about just the fact that Power Query is just clicking buttons, and then some of the most popular books don't even have Power Query in the title. Not saying anything, Ken.
Well, I mean, and there's an interesting play that Microsoft made on this one. So let's start with the obvious one though. First, Power Pivot was released in 2010. Power Query was first released in 2014. So it's 4 years younger. Okay, so 4 years, of time that it hasn't had its name out there. And then we ran into this problem, right? Because when Microsoft first released it, they released it as Power Query, and it was actually a Power Query tab on the ribbon. So it was, versus Power Pivot. So there was a couple of power things there to incite to entice the people who, are power users. but there was some discussion that was maybe also alienating some people because power is scary, which is not something that I buy into, but hey, whatever. The next thing that happened was Microsoft decided to go and say, hey, look, this is such an important thing. We'll roll it into the product as of Excel 2016, and we're going to put it on this on a button here. And I can't even remember what the first iteration of the button was called, but what was it? New query, I think it was.
Yes,
new query.
Yes. I think
so there was some confusion around that. Well, then it moved, and then it became Get Data. And then they put a group name under the bottom. They didn't name the group Power Query. They called it Get and Transform. And then they started to remove the brand Power Query from everywhere within the software. So even when you went into the Power Query editor, it became something else, Query Editor. So it was in what I would call debranded. And that was a big challenge, in my opinion. And it's something that I know there was a few of us running around with torches and pitchforks trying to get that changed. And it did get changed. It's now got back. At least when you open the Power Query Editor, it does say Power Query Editor on it. And I don't have any issue with the Get Data button. I think that makes sense. But I do wish that the group name said Power Query, not Get and Transform. But, I think that was a big issue. So it's almost like, I've always said with Microsoft that one of the things that I never understood with them is that they built this incredible language called VBA and then quietly tried not to tell anybody about it. And I feel that it was the same thing with Power Query. And yet I know they really want people to use it, but they basically did everything they could to debrand it when it got in the product. And it made no sense to me. And I mean, I argued about it a long time, and I mean, I know that they're trying to raise the profile of it. So hopefully it's coming back. But still, one of the biggest challenges that I have with it is, try and find, if you're a new user, what should you search for in order to get help? You don't know the language is called M. You don't know the product's called Power Query. You search for Excel. If you search for macro, you're going to find VBA, not Power Query. So I think that's a big issue in the discoverability aspect of what's there.
Yeah, so. I'd agree with that. And just I think as well, for me, the DAX getting all the focus is that DAX is just much harder to get started. So therefore, there's more people searching for that. More people need assistance with it. Power Query is such a beautiful thing because they're just buttons for virtually everything. As he said, you may not even need to get into the M code. Yep. We're bringing two worlds of people together with all this Power Query, Power Pivot, Power BI world. You've got the accountant Excel user world, engineers, operational people. And then you've got the database admin world who are coming from a place where they've probably built a view in a SQL database and they just go and get data, pull it in, and then write some DAX. They don't even click a button in Power Query. So I just think there's more demand for the knowledge of DAX because you hit a wall pretty quick. Whereas Power Query, if you've learned what the buttons do and you learn some of the techniques, it's much easier, I think, to learn incrementally.
Yeah, and it may not be efficient, but you can generally get the job done. Right, yeah. Where I know with DAX, you're right. Trying to debug a DAX statement if you're a new user is it's a world of hurt. You definitely need to have some knowledge behind the scenes and whatnot. But make no mistake though. I think that the profile and just the visibility of the pieces is also a real big distinguishment in that kind of scenario. And as we go back and we actually talk about what's the percentage of users who have even heard of Power Query and then much less have actually tried to go with it. Why aren't we getting the questions? Well, if they're not using the tool, you're not going to get the questions, right? So so that's a big piece there as well.
So we digress slightly from the book there. I just want to come back to that. So how do you write a book with someone else? How do you? So you and Miguel both, wrote it together.
Well, the first thing you do is you bust out Excel, and then you make yourself an outline of what you actually want to put in the book. You know what? The hard part of building one of these things out is really coming down and saying, okay, so you need to generate an outline of what you need, what's the progression of the thing going to be, and whatnot, and then the most complicated part to me of the whole deal is being able to once you have your outline, is being able to come up with data sets and samples that actually exhibit in a progressive and linear fashion how you're going to actually teach the material, because you can't start off with something that's at a level 9 of difficulty when you need to start with level 1. So coming up with those data sets is actually really difficult. Once you've got that done, then basically you use everybody's favorite Excel add-in, Word, to actually write the documentation itself, and you basically cut it up one chapter at a time, and you go in there and you deal with it. Once you've got it written, you send it off to your partner to go and do the proofing on it, and then it goes into the publication chain for all the copy editing and all that kind of stuff. So it's not hard. It's
time consuming.
It's not easy. It's definitely time consuming. Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily go and advocate writing books as a career choice unless you really, really love it, because it's. I'll tell you the writing this thing. I've put a month into working on the second edition, a month solid, a full-time month. Of working on the second edition, and boy oh boy, I'm halfway as far as I want it to be, right? It's a huge endeavor, because when you're doing this, you really want to do it right as well. That's the tricky part with it. But the good news is, because I know this question always comes up, is we are actually working on the second edition. It is live and it is going, and we're making good progress, but it's definitely slower than we'd like. So yeah, I knew that would come up if I didn't actually tell you. So
totally. So what's keeping you busy these days?
What's keeping me busy? Well, writing a book, that'd be one. I'm keeping busy with our SkillWave project. I run some. Not only the Power Query Academy there, I've got a self-service BI boot camp that I run there, which has live coaching that goes along with the prescribed material there. So I've got a session tomorrow morning for meeting with all of my students for Q&A. So that is taking me some time. I'm also the owner, author of Monkey Tools, which is an Excel add-in to help make people's lives easier when they're actually building data models. We do things like reviewing or giving you an interface to work with your Power Query code if you do like M that doesn't lock your Excel interface out like Power Queries does. We do all kinds of things like injecting queries into your workbook for you for calendar tables and other things as well. We even write some DAX and do some modeling stuff as well. So we're trying to help people build and audit business intelligence models there. So myself and my programmer Abdullah are working very hard on that, and we're pretty pleased actually with what we've been able to put out within the last 12 months. There's all kinds of things that's grown up to be a huge software product. So.
That's potentially a never-ending tweak. There's always going to be things you come across and go, oh, I could just do that and add this. And
remember how I said there's things that I probably shouldn't be working on that I do work on? I got one of those. One of my friends sent me a thing the other day saying, hey, have you ever thought about doing this? And next thing you know, I'm like, I pushed him back at beta build and said, can you try this? He's like, you're insane. I'm like, yeah, well, it was a good idea. I thought, what the heck, let's do it, right? So, that keeps us busy. So I'm trying to juggle a lot of hats, right? It's running a business. Is because we still run Excel Guru for our training business, although we're not traveling and training as under the COVID world here, but we're putting a lot of effort into SkillWave, trying to get that book written, working on software. So there's a lot of things that we're balancing off as we're working these days, for sure.
Are you good at staying focused on something, or do you get distracted? An email pops up with some sort of question from somewhere, or somebody's replied to a blog, and you go, I know I shouldn't answer that right now, but I really want to.
Can you hang on a second? I'm just answering an email over here. The answer is it depends, right? So, I'm fairly good about being focused on something when I've got a deadline. If the deadline's a little bit looser, a little bit further away, then at that point in time I can get distracted by things fairly easily. Typically. I don't know, as I say, I find that the most inspiring time for me is when I'm unfortunately overloaded with work, and that's when I do my best programming. But at the same time, there's definitely stuff that we focus and we just hammer out and get it done. So,
Yeah.
it depends. And I'm pretty sure most people are in a similar boat with that. So.
I want to jump back, something just sort of that you mentioned quite right back at the beginning. You just dropped into the conversation that your dad wrote a book.
Yeah.
What was the topic of that? So it runs in the family.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, it runs further back than that. My grandmother also wrote a book.
Oh wow. Okay.
So my grandmother, and actually this is kind of funny. Actually, so just think of the tie-in on this one, right? So my grandmother actually wrote a book on the textiles of the Kuna Indians of Panama.
Okay.
So where's Miguel based?
Yeah.
In Panama,
Panama
right? Like,
connection.
I mean, what a weird kind of thing to sort of come together. So, so she was the first, I guess, author of the family, and then and my dad actually was a toxicologist. So I'm going to make this real simple. He used to analyze blood and serum samples to figure out whether an animal died due to toxic or deficient levels of those things in their blood.
Okay.
And he was the world's leading expert in his field. So he actually wrote a series of 3 books. The first one is the actual text results, and the next 2 were actually, sorry. The first one was the mineral levels, and the second edition second publication was actually the bibliographies, which was twice as thick as the original book and outsold. Science people are crazy, right? The bibliographies outsold the original text.
Seriously.
And then the third one was on vitamin levels, and that one actually, the bibliography was within the same book. So he wrote his 3 books there, and then my first book was actually Ribbon X on how to customize the Office 2007 ribbon interface.
Ah.
And that was the part where I got to say that I have proudly become the 3rd generation author of bedtime reading for insomniacs. And once we sorry, Dad. Once we got past that one, that's where we got involved with Emmons for Data Monkey, and it's funny, the Ribbon X book is absolutely massive, and I mean, it's a great resource, but it's a tough read for somebody who's not big into that sort of area. Where Power Query, the MS for Data Monkey, is a much shorter book, but I find much more impactful for people, and something that we're super proud of. So lots of writing.
Interesting. And I'm chomping at the bit for the new release book of yours. So
I hear that a lot.
That book and Rob Colley's book, they're where I started, and it's just, it all helped and all pushed things towards where they are today. So the more people I can recommend that book to, and if it's got an updated version, then I'll just be recommending it wholeheartedly.
Cool, thanks, appreciate that.
No worries. All right, so coming towards the end of the interview, I've got my little section now called 5 impossible questions. See what I did there? See what I did there?
Yes, I got that. That's tricky.
Okay, so if you get any right, I will be mightily impressed, because I had to look up all of these, and they are ridiculously niche questions that you will not know the answer to. Okay, so just bear that in mind.
Great.
You may know. Okay. Okay. And these are unfair, I realise that. So, if you type in equals #shared in your formula bar in Power Query, you get a list of functions that show up. But how many show up? How many rows does #shared? I'll give you to within the nearest 20.
The answer is actually, it depends. It's not consistent, because there's actually there's a section on the top where it actually goes and enumerates your queries and that you've actually created yourself. So I'm going to give you the short answer on this one, man. I don't actually care how many show up. Because if I'm going to read documentation, I'm actually going to the M documentation site instead of using that anyway.
I think you get a bonus point just for that bit of knowledge. Okay, so the answer is 795 for those people who do care, plus whatever ones you've done yourself. So there we go.
Doesn't that actually go in and change though, depending on the version that you get? Because if they add a new one,
probably. I'm doing as of today on my computer. Okay, is there a function called list.remove matching items?
No.
The answer is yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
Got it.
I looked at the old documentation.
On my version, as of today. Is there a smiley face on the Power Query editor window in Excel?
Am I allowed to look?
No.
See, that also is an unfair question, because I think the answer to that one, does that not depend on whether or not you're on the Insider channel?
No, this is on both, I checked.
Is
so
it?
my
Okay, in that case,
and Insider.
yes, there is.
Yes, there is. Good answer. Is there a smiley face on the Power Query editor window in Power BI?
I would think no.
No, there's not. Good answer. Well done.
They used up all the yellow for the chrome of the application.
And then final question. Name a difference between the Home tab, so Power Query Home tab, a difference between the one in Excel and the one in Power BI, apart from the smiley face. Okay. Name any difference. If you had a screenshot of the Power Query Excel Home tab and the Power BI Home tab, what's different?
I'm trying to think where the Run Diagnostics button is in Power BI. Is that on the Home tab?
No.
No.
There is one obvious one that you will kick yourself.
There's an I believe there's an AI component that's on that ribbon. I don't know actually what the heck it's actually called, because I spend most of my time in Excel. But yeah.
It is called AI Insights. Excellent, Ken. Excellent.
Had most of it. Had the first part.
The other more obvious one is Excel says close and load, whereas Power BI says
apply.
Close and apply. That was the other.
There you go.
Excellent, though. Okay, so crystal ball time. What would you like to see in the future for Power Query? Is there anything on Excel user voice or Power BI or ideas.powerbi.com that you'd want people to vote for?
So there's one that I would like to see in Excel that relates to Power Query. I mean, I've got a few, obviously, but there's one specifically that in Excel that relates to Power Query. It's not actually specifically a Power Query function, but it sets you up for failure in your Power Query if you don't have it. And that is, we need the ability to change the table name when you create a table so that you can set it right away in the dialog when you're creating the table name. Because the challenge is, if you use your get data from table, it sets it all up through Power Query as table 1, and then if you go and rename your table, it blows everything up. So that really needs to be changed in Excel. Something we've been asking for a long time.
Yeah. And I'll put a link in the descriptions for the user voice idea for people to click on and go and vote for that one.
Yeah. The other one is Dataflows as a Power Query data source in Excel.
Oh, yes.
Desperately need that. I mean, I've got a list of other user voice ideas that I'd love to see your votes on, but not Power Query specific. I don't think. I mean, I have to say, I mean, in all fairness, I mean, the amount of work that the Power Query team has done over the past, 4 years of building this thing out. I mean, they keep on adding new cool stuff to it on a regular basis. I mean, there's obviously things that I would like to see change, but I feel like I poured a lot of passion into getting the whole feature about caching the child nodes. So I haven't really been on the warpath lately about anything else. I figured someone else's turn for a little
Keep
while.
your powder dry.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get excited about something soon, and then we'll go crazy. But
well, the stuff they're doing in the whole Dataflows space, the actual Power Query Online, the graphical interactions and those sorts of things, it's pretty exciting how this stuff's developing.
Yeah, it'll be neat when we start eventually seeing some of that kind of stuff flow into the Power BI and Excel apps and whatnot for consistency. It'll be awesome.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Okay, so before we sign off, anything else you'd like to mention? Have you got any upcoming sessions? You've mentioned your book. Is there anything else sort of? I've mentioned Skill Wave, so that'll keep Miguel happy because he got angry on Twitter the other day when he didn't mention Skill Wave.
I know, yeah. Jeez, I'm like, holy smokes, and rightly so. I mean, I should have mentioned it before, but you know what? Let me say that probably one of the easiest ways to sort of keep in touch with the things that are going on in my world is actually to sign up for my newsletter at excelguru.ca.
Okay.
Because at that point, if we do have things happening, then we generally will send out a link to people to let them know if we got new courses or if we're going to be in certain areas. One day again, eventually maybe I'll make it up to Perth and we'll put on a course or something like that together or whatever. I mean, that's where you'd hear about that kind of stuff. So I think that's probably the easiest place to go.
I will put links below.
Yeah. Besides that, I mean, just watch for our user group stuff, right? I mean, the Vancouver Power BI user group meets twice a month. We've got Excel sessions. We got Power BI or Excel track and a Power BI track. So if you're not familiar with those, and I know Win, you also have the Perth user group as well. That's out there. So I mean, they're great places to get some, get a 1 hour look at some of the stuff that's going on from presentation experts on different topics here related to Power Query and Power Pivot, Power BI, Excel, and whatnot. So
awesome. And one of the requirements for coming onto Power Query Magic is you need to leave 2 articles or videos or blogs. And the caveat is one has to be your most popular one, even if you don't like it. And the other one is your favorite. So, and I'll put links as well. So what ones have you picked?
Well, so my most popular one, and this actually makes me sad, is that the most popular one that I have is how to use the if function in Power, how to write the if function in Power Query, because for an Excel user who comes in and says equals capital IF, the first thing that happens is you get asked if you spelled if correctly. It doesn't ask you if you cased it correctly. And then when you put in the opening parenthesis and put commas between things, it just messes everything up. You got to spell it out. So I think I posted that back in like 2014 or something like that, and it is still the most read article that I have, and that just makes me die a little inside every time I see that. It really does.
Yeah, it's helping. It's helping.
It is, but it shouldn't be, right? Like this should be so much easier. And as far as my favorite goes, I think I gave you links for these. When my favorite ones that I have to say right now are actually they're on my YouTube channel, and they're some of the recordings that I've actually done from different meetup groups that where we've introduced some features of Monkey Tools and some overviews of Monkey Tools, which is the software that we work on. I have a lot of fun in those meetups. We go through and we try and actually share some techniques on how to do some things manually, and then show how we can actually do it with the software faster. So if you're interested in learning about those, I mean, check out the links on those guys. The meetup from KSA, or Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, really sort of goes into an overview of a whole bunch of features. And then my most recent one actually was with you, Win, on looking at the slowly changing dimension problem, where we actually walk through what's required to build a slowly changing dimension, spend about, 40 minutes on all the mechanics of how to do it manually, and then I show you how Monkey Tools does it in like 2 minutes. So it's awesome. Kind of a neat thing. So. And I have a ball with those. So those have to be my favorite, I think, right now. Perfect. But I reserve the right to supersede those with new favorites later on, right?
We can always change the links later. You just have to dub this bit on the end.
That's all good. Or just do another interview, right? Just updated favorite list.
That'll do. So just a very last thing then. So I'm a fan of the UK radio show Desert Island Discs. I don't know if you ever listened to any of it, but they put a castaway on an island, and then you've got to pick your 8 favorite records. But then they give them sort of one luxury item they're allowed to take with them. So I want to strand you on an island. You're allowed to take a luxury or any sort of item, but it has to begin with M, just in honor of Power Query. So what have you come up with? What would you want with you?
So once again, this kind of depends, right? If it's a luxury island, I want money. But if it's not a luxury island, if we're actually stranded somewhere,
money. I like it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it works, right? If it's a luxury island, but you know what? If it's a shipwreck, and like we're done, okay, you know what? It'd have to be a machete. Going for the practical, man.
Answer.
Yeah, going for the practical.
Answer. Right, so thank you very much for coming on Power Query Magic, Ken. I'll leave links to everything in the details section. Yes, have a magical day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Win. This was a heck of a lot of fun, and hopefully we get to do it again sometime.